totally failed to create societies anything like as successful as, for instance, European societies. And therein a question arises, which is, if we are the recipients of the final revelation, why is everything so awful where we live?
Why do the Muslims hate the Jewish people? What is it about Islam and Muslim that there's such hatred of not just the Jewish people, but Westerners, Americans? What is it? What's the root? Today in Jewish history marks the saddest day of the year. It's the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, which marks the history when both of the temples were destroyed in Jerusalem. The first one by the Babylonians and then by the Romans. This is at 70 CE. And we have been on the run since. We have been expelled from country to country. Wherever we tried to reestablish, we eventually had to leave, from the expulsion in Spain, and then into Russia, dealing with the Stalinist Russia. And now we finally came to the shores of America. We have finally established a homeland in 1948. And yet, what is it? What's the underlying issue that they have with the Jewish people? Please listen in with me with this discussion with Mr. Douglas Murray, who explains the root of all of this. And perhaps we may be able to begin understanding, and with that perhaps we can begin unpacking how we can deal with it. Kindly subscribe to this channel so that a little bit of light can continue on pushing away a lot of darkness.
Well, there's two particular things worth mentioning. One is, of course, that Muhammad, the founder of Islam, himself beheaded, massacred many, many Jews. Famously, there's one battle in particular, and the Banu Quraysh. It's a story you can find in the Quran and the Hadith, and of course, this is because the Jews would not accept the revelation of Muhammad, such as it was. And so they were seen within Islamic tradition as being one of the first people who turned down the opportunity to join Islam. And as a result, of course, Muhammad decapitated hundreds and hundreds of Jews. So that's not a good start. But there's a bigger thing, I think, within the Muslim world, which is worth mentioning, which the late Bernard Lewis pointed out on a number of occasions, which is the great problem within Islam when it comes to not just Judaism, but the wider non-Islamic world, is that the Muslim religion claims to be the last revelation from God to man, which, as we all know, is a very large claim to make. It says there have been previous revelations, but this is the last and final one. And what's more, God has given you a book, the Quran. And the Quran is the one book you need. The opening, here is the book wherein is no doubt, which is quite a bold claim as well, I'd say. But the claim at the foundation of Islam is, here is the book wherein is no doubt, and it's the only book you need. And it's the final word from God that man will ever have. Now, if you are the recipients of this book, the people who end up either converting or being forced to convert to Islam, and eventually the areas that Islam takes over by force, if you are somebody who's brought up in that tradition, you would think that being the recipient of the final revelation from God, you would be in a just tip-top situation. You know, you would imagine that, well, this is going very well. We've got the final revelation from God. What's not to like? What's not on our side? And then several things happen in the millennia since, which is, first of all, many, many Muslims realize that despite having the final revelation from God, things don't seem to be going very well. Until oil is discovered in certain parts of the Middle East, most people live in total destitution. The discoveries and enlightenments of Europe largely passed the Muslim world by. This shouldn't be exaggerated. Certain parts of the Muslim world, of course, give the Western world certain parts of what becomes the Western European tradition. So there were times of interplay. There were times of mutual learning. And now, of course, everyone looks back at them, or many people look back at those times with nostalgia. Nevertheless, in the main, the Muslim world cut itself off from the rest of the world and didn't care to learn from the rest of the world, didn't improve the economic conditions of its people, totally failed to create societies anything like as successful as, for instance, European societies. And therein a question arises, which is, if we are the recipients of the final revelation, why is everything so awful where we live? And then you have the additional thing, which is, and how come the Jews return or re-establish of course, many Jews are already living in the area that's now Israel, but already lived there, but many others come from other parts of the world, including from the Middle Eastern countries where they're chucked out by the governments in 48 and so on. The Muslim world sees this tiny, tiny bit of land, which, among other things, is the only bit of the Middle East that doesn't have any oil. And they make of it a much more successful country than any of the countries around. Now, if you create a Palestinian state, you just have another failed Arab state, another failed Muslim state to add to the more than 50 already failed Muslim and Arab states. What is the explanation that the Jews who refused the Prophet's invitation to Islam are still here, have this tiny bit of land, and make all of these discoveries and other things that show themselves to be so successful? It's some kind of stab in the heart. And instead of saying, we're doing this wrong, the thing is, the Jews are doing something right, and that must mean that they've rigged the game. That's why they care, among other things. And it leads to the deep pathology of anti-Semitism, which has been largely eradicated in Europe among Europeans, not entirely, but largely. There are still some bits of the far right you can find across Europe, and occasionally in the UK with a sort of the whiff of this noxious thing still emerges. On the left, of course, it's much closer to the boat. But principally anti-Semitism in our own day, of the kind that we hoped had ended with Hitler, exists and indeed thrives in the Muslim world. And the Muslim world is now in our world in Europe, and so we have the Hitlerian horrors of anti-Semitism back.
And this is what we are dealing with currently when we fast forward since the very first beheading of Muhammad of hundreds and thousands of Jews at the onset, when the Jewish people did not want to submit to this new religion. Judaism for 3,337 years has been very loyal to its initial faith. The faith of Judaism began with Abraham, our forefather. Abraham, our forefather, was the one who introduced monotheism to the world. He didn't grow up in a Jewish home. Abraham grew up in a home of idol worshippers. Matter of fact, his father, known as Terach, was an idol manufacturer. And at that time, the world was they were worshiping idols. They were worshiping the various constellations in the sky, the sun, the moon, the stars. They were worshiping anything. They had no idea of a God existing. Abraham, it took him 75 years to begin having a revelation with God. But at 3 years old already, Abraham recognized that the world couldn't have just appeared, that it couldn't just happen by itself. There had to be a God. Even for those who believe in the theory of a Big Bang, someone had to make that Big Bang happen. Nothing happens by itself. So it was this journey that Abraham began introducing the world to God. And then finally at age 75, God appeared to Abraham and they developed a relationship. And God appointed Abraham to be his ambassador, to teach the world about godliness, about the omnipotent, the omnipresent, God Almighty, the creator of all things. And as you read through the Bible in Genesis, Abraham went through a very difficult fighting off of various kings at the time, and even his own family, his own parents, where he grew up with, who were idol worshippers. He had to introduce the concept of monotheism. And thus has begun the journey. Even with Abraham, there were 10 different times that God tested his loyalty. The final test was when God asked Abraham to bring Isaac as a sacrifice. And when Abraham was ready to do it, at the very final moment, God said, no, that's not Judaism. We are about the living. I want you to start a religion that you are going to be the father of this great nation that's going to teach the world about the value of life, the value of living, to cherish life, to appreciate life, to support life, to sustain life, to embrace life. Everything is going to be about life. Everything is going to be about living in this world. That was God's mandate to Abraham. And that God told Abraham, I will give you the power of blessing. Whoever you bless will be blessed. And God promised to Abraham that I will protect you, I will guide you. And you're going to be the smallest of all the nations. But yet, when you follow my mandate, and you're loyal to me, and you're loyal to the Bible, to the rules and regulations of the Bible, to help make this world a better place, then I will have your back. You got this, God told Abraham, as we say in nowadays. And Abraham, against all odds, broke through so many barriers, paved the way so that we now can appreciate and understand what God is all about. You and I were created by God. You and I embody a soul, a part of God. The day you and I were born, God said the world can no longer exist without you. So yes, you have a soul of God, but you also have a mandate from God. You also have a mission from God to be an ambassador for good. And that is the difference between Islam, and Judaism. Islam is committed to Muhammad, and rightfully so. That's their religion, they're entitled to. But the difference is, are you committed to life, to the living, or are you committed to death, war, and suffering? That is the difference. Judaism as a religion welcomes all religions, respects all religions, supports all religions, cares about all religions, and has room for all religions. It doesn't require anyone to believe like Judaism believes. We don't go out, we don't proselytize trying to convert people to Judaism. It's not our thing. Because we believe that whatever religion you are born to, that is your divine providence. That's where you need to be. And if you are born into a Muslim home, that's fine. But practice Islam in a way that confirms with the Torah, with God, with the Creator, with the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill is part of the commandments. Thou shalt not steal is part of the 10 Commandments. When you adhere and follow the commandments that God gave, and you are respectful of others, you appreciate others, you tolerate others, you understand others, and you allow boundaries, you allow others to follow different religions, different theological beliefs, then we could live in the world together. Living in a world that if you don't believe what I believe, I have to kill you, that's not godly. That cannot, under any circumstances, be God's wishes. That to kill someone just because they don't believe what you believe. So Judaism for 3,337 years have survived all the types of tortures, displacements, holocausts, genocides, expulsions, inquisitions, you name it. We have been through it all. But we are still here today. Today, in the Jewish calendar, marks the 9th day of this month, of the Hebrew month, which is an anniversary. That's a very sad day. We fast from night to night, and we sit on the floor, and we mourn the destruction of both of our temples. But today, I mentioned in our synagogue at rgpoway, where we survived the mass shooting from a white supremacist who came with the intent to kill us all on April 27, 2019. I was sitting at our synagogue, and I mentioned, look at history. Look what preceded us. But yet we're still here. Even us here, we survived the mass shooting. Mrs. Lori Lynn Gilbert Kay was murdered in cold blood right in front of me. I lost the function of these two fingers from the AR-15, from the terrorist, the white supremacist who came with blood of anti-Semitism running through his body, but he did not succeed. All of the anti-Semitism throughout all the generations did not succeed. We are still here. We are here because God gave us a mandate and we haven't completed our mission to make this world a better place. Just like after the shooting at our synagogue, I declared a little bit of light pushes away a lot of darkness. That's the name of our channel. So too, today, each one of us can be a little bit of light in your own way. Do random acts of goodness and kindness. Do not underestimate any small good action, even a smile, even a kind gesture, a compliment, something which may seem to be tiny could be gigantic in God's eyes. So let's all do as much good as we can to make this world a better place. And let's understand each other, appreciate each other, embrace each other, make room for each other, even though we may have theological difference, different beliefs. We are still all children of God. God bless you. God loves you.